Now, where were we? It's good to be back. Thank you so very much for everything, and I appreciate your love, your fellowship, and the friendships we made here. But we are the Boltz family. I think most of you know us already, and I'm going to just give testimony. I know I gave a brief testimony the very first time we came, but I'll share the testimony and we'll get into the ministry here. I was brought up in a church. My mom made me go to church every Sunday. I never missed Sunday school. I never missed church. My dad was a truck driver and worked on weekends as well, so he wasn't there as often, but we always had Jesus in our home. And when I turned 16, I got a job actually on a golf course, and I started working on Sundays and missing some church, and that was okay because I was working. And gradually went through there, graduated from high school, went off to college, and I stopped going to church. And then through my early adulthood, I met my wife, and she came from pretty much the same background, and we didn't go to church often. We started our family, and it got to the point where I pretty much Easter and Christmas and maybe a time or two through the year we would show up at the church doors. But you know, all along, I did have a father-in-law that got saved late in life, and when we had our family and we started going, my wife and I would go away with our friends and buddies and all that, and I'd come home, and I could guarantee you every time I came home, my father-in-law was sitting at the dining room table waiting for us, and he'd have his Bible, and he would share his Bible with me. And I used to get frustrated with him. I used to call him the Bible thumper. And I used to get so frustrated with him because I would tell him, you know, I love you, but I'm going to heaven. I know Jesus. I know about Jesus. I don't do anything really bad. The little bit of drinking I do and that, I said, Jesus forgives and I'm going to be in heaven. And that went on. And then in October of 1997, something happened in our house. I came home and my wife tells me she got saved. And I said, well, I always thought you were saved, but that's good. And, I was like, well, now we're both going to heaven. And but anyway, she started becoming like my father-in-law, and I had two father-in-laws. Every time I come home from work, she'd have things changed around in the house. I go to get a movie or something, and it'd be gone. And it's like, what's going on? And she's like, we can't have those things in our house, and we need these things in our house. And I said, now you're getting like your dad. And this really got frustrating with me. And for 3 months this went on. And then in January of 1998, on a Monday morning after she was at church, she was taking the kids at church. And I'd go with her every once in a while, but not always, because I was working. And Monday morning we got up and I was getting ready for work, and she came and we had a little discussion about homeschooling. And I got very upset, and I left for work. And I had all intentions of not coming home that night. I thought our marriage was over. I thought she just went across the line and that was it. I couldn't handle it anymore. And as I said this morning, I drove an hour to work at that time. And I would listen to music all the time. And on the way to work that day, I could not find any music. Nothing would come in. And I finally found a radio station. I had left it on. And it was a man speaking. And he brought the gospel like I never heard it before. I didn't get saved in my car that day. I didn't get saved at work. But at work, I just stirred and I thought to myself all day, what if my father-in-law is right? What if my wife is right? And the family that I grew up with and how they taught me was wrong. I quickly learned that day that if I would have kept going the road I was on, I would have missed heaven by 18 inches. I had the head knowledge of Jesus Christ. I knew there was God, but I never ever asked him into my heart and have a personal relationship with him. I went home that night. My wife was surprised to see me. And I went home and I told her what happened during the day. And I went up to my bedroom and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. Started going to church with my family. We never would miss any services. Anytime the church doors were open, we were there. And it wasn't too long after my salvation, the men were going away for a Friday afternoon, Friday night, and Saturday, and they asked me to go along. And I said, sure, I'll go with it. That sounds pretty fun. Let's go. And we went, and it was sort of like a retreat. The one church I went to said, It's a men's advance and a women's retreat. Women retreat, men advance. So we went to this men's weekend, and the theme that weekend was Joshua 24:15. The theme was Choose You This Day. And you'll hear pastors and you'll hear missionaries say, oh, my life verse is whatever the verse is. I have a life sentence. Joshua 24:15, if you continue to read the verse, the very last part of that verse says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I went home that weekend and I told my wife, I said, it's not only good enough that we're going to church, we need to serve. And she already knew that. She was just waiting on me. And I started serving. My wife started serving. We were Sunday school teachers, junior church workers. She ran the women's ministry. I ran the men's ministry at one point. Whenever the pastor came or anybody came and asked us to be something, we never said no. We tried to do our best to serve the Lord. And one thing we did was we always had our children with us. They were always there when the church doors were open. If there wasn't something for them, they were serving with us with whatever we were doing. And that continued. And then we surrendered to full-time ministry. Now, my wife is, if you get to know us really well, you'll quickly find out my wife is the crazy one. I'm saying my wife is crazy. And she came to me after we surrendered to full-time ministry, and she said, I have a burden to go live in the jungle and reach people of the jungle. I said, we surrender to serve God, and we'll go anywhere God wants us to go but the jungle. I said, I am not giving up what I have to go to the jungle to do that. I said, that's not in me. I said, God's not calling me to that. But I had a burden for Indians. And I would tell her every once in a while when we had these discussions, I said, I have a burden for Indians. I could see us on an Indian reservation someday telling American Indians about Jesus Christ. And that went on, but we got into full-time ministry. We asked God what He wanted us to do, and quickly we got into our first full-time ministry, and that was foster care back in Pennsylvania. We went through training through a Christian organization, and then over the next 4 years, we fostered, and we had 23 children come through our home in that 4-year period. We had them anywhere from a weekend to 2 years. We got 2 biological brothers. One was 10 months old when we got him, and the brother was 2 years old. We had them for 2 years, and we took them everywhere the state wanted us to take them. Doctor's visits, therapy, visitations with their parents, whatever they needed to be done, we took them. And then finally the state of Pennsylvania ruled them adoptable, and we knew God wanted us to adopt them, and that's Kevin and Justin. We adopted them into our family as our own. And then because of some things with them and the ages of our children, the state and the foundation that we were fostering with asked us to stop fostering for a while until our children got older. So we knew God closed that door, and He was going to open another one. We continued to pray. It wasn't long. Our next door opened. Hope Children's Home from Tampa, Florida came through Pennsylvania on tour. The kids sang. The kids gave testimony. The director gave the message that night. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in the back left-hand corner of the church where I normally sat. I didn't move if visitors were there. It wasn't my pew, but I usually sat back in the left corner and my wife was there. And we never discussed it beforehand, but we just were attracted to children, so we were really interested in this ministry. And I'll never forget Buddy Morrow, who we called Uncle Buddy. He was given the message, and he made a statement in his message. He said, "Isn't there anyone here that feels called by God to come and work with children? We need help in Tampa, Florida." And as soon as he said that sentence, my wife and I turned and looked at each other. Never talked about it beforehand or anything. We said, this is it. We talked to Buddy, and we actually went down and visited and made sure that's where God wanted us, and God made it clear. And we went down in 2002 to Tampa, Florida, and we were house parents in the girls' dorm of Hope Children's Home. We had over 100 girls come through our care while we were there. And then in 2007 at a mission conference, God called me to Guyana. And I had no clue when he first called me. I knew it was Guyana where he wanted me. And I was like, my wife and I were talking about it. And we quickly started researching Guyana, and we found out why God called us there. He took care of both our burdens. We are going to the jungle, so never tell God never, because that's where He's going to put you. We're going to the jungle to reach the people of of the villages of the jungles of Guyana. But the other thing is, He got my burden too. The native people of Guyana are called Amerindians, and they have a lot of heritage like our American Indians. They have a Heritage Month in September, and we were there just at the end of that, and they had all the dressings like an American Indian would. So it's a lot of, at that time, their history was a lot like our American Indian